Good afternoon, everybody. This is Matthew McQueenie of the Mix Minus Podcast. Well, it could be afternoon, it could be your morning, it could be your time at the gym, it could be your work day, it could be your off day, whatever that is. But for me, today it is Sunday, March 12th, just before 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today is the day that my family, this is a tradition started from my wife's side, from my wife's mother, so my mother-in-law, where we have St. Patrick's Day dinner. St. Patrick's Day will be at the end of this week, 5 days from today, on the 17th, but it is a tradition, and now it is hosted at our house because we have the baby and we have the space. My family has been assimilated into this tradition, and we're Irish all the way, McQueenie. But what we do is we have a nice Sunday or Saturday, usually Sunday, dinner around the time of St. Patrick's Day in the middle part of March. And we have shepherd's pie and corned beef and all that stuff. Sometimes I wonder with the Irish, the thing that bugs me is almost the marketing. We don't have a lot of cool stuff, a lot of stuff that I love. I think the green is a little funky of a color. Like, it's not a cool color to be walking around in green. It's kind of like when you're a Mets fan. It's not the coolest gear to be walking around with, that really blue and orange. Yankees have it made there where it's much more staid. You can kind of look cool walking around with that stuff. It's hard to look cool. You're really earning your points as a Mets fan when you walk around in that gear. Kind of the same thing with the Jets. The Giants are a little more staid as well. That's why the Giants and the Yankees tend to almost go together. Mets, Jets tend to go together as well. You really earn your keep when you're a fan and you wear their stuff. But for this one day, I do wear my green. There's a game called like Gaelic. It's almost an Irish form of rugby. And I have a jersey that my dad got me for one of these teams. I think it's County Leitrim. It's from where the family is from. We do have family over there still. And actually, might be 3 or 4 years now. We went to some match in the Bronx up by Riverdale, I believe. And it was a match of this game. I really don't know the rules, but it looks rugby-ish. So I do have that jersey, and I will wear that today. I didn't really go out in public with it. But yeah, the Irish have some interesting branding. I don't love it. It doesn't mean I'm ashamed of being Irish, but the colors are funny. The names can be kind of funny. I guess Conor McGregor's kind of cool. There can be some cool aspects to it. There's some neat ideals that come from it. But yeah, the food's not the greatest. Does not pair well with, even the beer is heavy. It's like Guinness. It's not my favorite all the way, but we do have this one day where we have this food, and we do make our shepherd's pie with turkey. So you can end up eating that for a while. The food's heavy. It's intense. But again, I've talked such crap about the Irish, but it's just always a feeling I have about it, that it just has that feeling where it's not the coolest, but you know what? Some days you go for it. It's like Irish Halloween or something. We dress up, we eat all the food, and move on. At least spring is before us at some point. But of course, we're in the midst of weird weather. February was like warm at a lot of points. Got up near like 70 a couple days, which is always really strange. And then Friday, 2 days ago, we had a snowstorm. We got 5 inches where I live in Sparta, which always gets the worst of everything usually because we're at the top of a mountain. So you kind of get all that mountain effect snow, I guess I'd call it. And then in 2 days, on Tuesday, starting tomorrow night actually, we're supposed to get like 3 feet of snow basically. So it's always fun living here. It's always diversified. We go from 70 degrees to 70 inches basically. Well, it won't be 70. It'll probably be like 20, they're saying. Maybe 25 inches. It's going to be a mammoth. It's going to be big. It's going to go Monday night to some point on Wednesday. I don't even know if the weathermen can get this one wrong. This is going to be intense. Talk about St. Patrick's Day. I actually wrote an article for the Newark, I think they're the Newark Tourism Board. They have a website called newarkhappenings.com. And the magazine I write for called Newark Bound, which is a really fun thing to do. It comes out twice a year. I've done a lot of the sports articles over the last, I think this was my 3rd issue that just came out about a month ago. And it's been really fun. I'll usually write about 2 feature articles for it. And that can be like 750 words or so. you focus on things like the Devils, you focus on the New York Red Bull or Red Bulls. The most recent one I did was about a really cool up-and-coming boxer who just went pro. He was in the Olympics. He won the silver medal. His name is Shakur Stevenson. He was named after Tupac Shakur. He was born only, I think, 9 months after Tupac was killed. He's only 19 years old. It's amazing 20 years has passed since that time, but hey, this guy's cool, though. He's going to be a legit boxer. Floyd Mayweather even thought very highly of him, was seeking him out, wanted him to be under his banner, under his professional tutelage, under his promotional company. But I believe he went with someone else, Top Rank. I'm not huge into the boxing game to understand all of the differences of these groups, but he's a cool guy, and really researching up his story, it's very, very interesting. And I actually ended up comparing it a lot to Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. The idea of the perfect place and time coming together, the outside aspects of your life. You know, the grandfather was big in the boxing game and brought the kid up from a young age, getting those 10,000 hours in. He's constantly boxing. He loves boxing. He's shadow boxing. It's all he wanted to do. Has a lot of those aspects, and it was really fun to write about. I did not know much, but the editors brought it up to my attention and said, could you write about him? I said, sure, and I dove straight in. I'm loving this kind of renaissance in my life of writing, of getting back in writing, because anyone who knows, when I was in my early 20s, like 21, I started writing every day for NJ.com, the fan blog for the New Jersey Nets. And every day I would write about them, every single day, sometimes 2-3 articles a day. It was like my passion. It was everything I wanted to do. I was getting paid $50 a month. But to be getting paid anything was amazing. It was just something that just blew my mind, that I could be paid. I could bill these $50 and get it back. And I was writing on NJ.com. And at the time, in whatever search engines, all that, I was getting the same credit for what I was writing as like Dave D'Alessandro or the top sports writers or the top writers on the Star Ledger. It was all being filtered in with the same information within the same articles. It would be me, it would be him. I had little ads around the site. Well, not ads, but little placements, teasers, nothing but Nets, the NJ.com Nets fan blog. It was a lot of fun, and I've always written, and I was able to parlay that into working for the Nets and writing every day from within the team. And it was so great. I was just constantly writing. And then when I left the Nets, I did continue to write some on that fan blog, which I turned the lights back on and just continued to do it. But it wasn't the same. I would get some big articles I would write. You know, I'd maybe write once a week, once every couple days at the most. But I didn't have the same level because I went so hard. I went so hard early, and then I went so hard when I was actually writing for the team, that when you come out on the other end, it was kind of like, what is it for? I've gotten the full effect of the positivity of the, you know, of everything. I cashed that check basically to get to that level, to write for the Nets. And it wasn't like I was writing for big outlets or anything like that. And I was on to a new career at the time. So I did dip my toe in. I would write about big things. I'd write about when, I always remember when Devin Harris had like 2 nights in a row on the road where he had like 45 points, 54 points, something like that. And he just had these amazing Russell Westbrook type stat sheet lines. And it was just fantastic. I wrote about when the Nets traded Vince Carter because I had a lot of insight and a lot of inside knowledge from my time there that I was able to give out to the world through those stories. But I really did kind of let it go a little bit. And I would continue to write somewhat about technology. I would continue to write here and there on my own blog, but it just wasn't the same. I mean, we all continue to create on our Facebooks, on our Twitter. We're always coming up with ideas, no matter who we are. And a bunch of years ago, when I started this podcast, it filled that hole. It filled that need of creating content and putting out there. It's not writing, but it's the blank canvas of speaking and putting out these stories. And so that kind of did it well. And then ultimately, I got in with this Newark Bound magazine group. And it was a great thing. I pitched them an idea at the time, which was NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, is based in Newark, actually, right up there on Lock Street. They actually have a brand new arena coming in maybe next year. But they played right now in like 1,000-person arena that could seat about 1,000 people. It's small. But last 2 years ago, NJIT went into Ann Arbor and beat the University of Michigan. Huge game, and it brought a lot of notoriety. I remember I was walking my son around. He was still a baby, so I was up in the middle of the night, and I was walking him around, burping him, the whole thing you do with a newborn. And I remember looking on my phone, and I often like to look at Google Trends to kind of see what's going on, what are the big kind of ideas that are out there, what are the big breaking news items, trends. And I saw number 10 or number 8, NJIT, and I went, what the heck? My first thought was, oh no, is there a school shooting? Because that's kind of the world we live in now, where you see something like that, and your greatest fear is that, hey, if it's a school trending, if there's no other aspects to this school that should make it go into the public consciousness, it's got to be a school shooting, right? I mean, I know NJIT can create innovative products and different things like that, but not to the level to be trending immediately. And I looked further because you can click the link in the trends, and there it was. They stunned Michigan. They beat Michigan in Ann Arbor. And then I remember at that point, I immediately went on the website, and they're a smaller program. They were Division I. At the time, they did not have a conference they were playing in, so they were sort of orphans, and they had to create their schedules, and the coach had to fight hard to find games, to play big teams. And then once you're not in a conference and you go in and beat Michigan, you're not going to get a lot of other games because you're almost there to fill the schedule of teams, but they're expecting to beat you. So if you start beating them, they're not going to want to schedule you because they'll look bad. And when you don't have a conference, it's impossible to kind of patch together games on a schedule because the conference builds in a lot of games, obviously, once you get going. I think it's in January. But I saw this, and I went to their website. I found the coach's information. As a smaller program, it's all out there. It's not hidden. And I fired an email off to him. I said, I'd love to have you on. I got this podcast. I love things going on in Newark. I think it's great. This story, NJIT beating Michigan. Oh, it'll be fantastic. And I thought, when I did some more research, and then obviously that week he was on a lot of big shows because it's a big story. I mean, it made NJIT basically go mainstream. And it was a big piece of them getting ultimately into a conference. I think it's called the Atlantic Sun. And so I'm hearing the story, and then I find out that he got his first job working for Tim Capstraw, who is and was when I was at the Nets color announcer for the radio. A great guy, the Capper. He's just a great guy, very inclusive person. I couldn't say a bad word about him. I think the guy's fantastic. He was very nice to me. And so I start seeing these connections happen. I'm like, oh, it's going to be a great interview. So I fire off the email. The coach never gets back to me, but then later in the week he does. And he says, I'd love to. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get back to you. It's been crazy getting through my emails and my texts and all this. And I said, oh, phew, this is awesome. And so I was able to set up the time with him. And he ultimately gave me about 40 minutes. I think it was after a shoot around. They were up in Worcester, Massachusetts, I believe. And from the hotel, he gave me 40 minutes, 40 great minutes. It was just an amazing story to get. And so through that, I have some connections to this Newark Bound magazine. I know the people from other work I've done at the company I work with. They were an agency that did marketing stuff and managed big government projects and such. And so I'd worked with them through that. And then they were going to be pivoting, this group from this company, they were going to be pivoting into a magazine, into a publishing outfit. And one of the main platforms was going to be this Newark Bound magazine. And so I got to talking to them, and I said, oh, have you heard about this NJIT team, this coach, this great story? They got a new arena coming. They have all this. And I felt like I was on the ground floor of this great story, and they didn't know about it. And that, to me, is always the cool thing. I love kind of getting the pulse of something and finding my way to it and being the one who knows and then is able to parlay that into something. And so I said, this could be a great story. I'd already done this interview on my own with the guy. I had some connection with him where he would take my call or my text or my email and get right back to me. We had this connection from that interview. And I said, I'd love to do this if you guys would ever be open to it. I'd love to write about this coach in the NJIT basketball program for the Newark Bound. And then they came back to me and said, go for it. So with that, I reached out to the coach again. I went up to the offices there on Lock Street, and I did another little podcast with him in a way. I did end up putting it on SoundCloud, but it wasn't for my podcast. It was for this article that I was going to write. So remember interviewing them at the time. They were going to be going on a road trip to play Kentucky, so that was kind of cool. But they were finally in this conference, and so it was this great kind of it was this great end of the story. They were finally not orphans anymore, and so we had this interview, and I wrote this great little story about it. I was able to get a lot of good quotes, and with that, it started my way to almost become the sports person for this magazine, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to be writing again. I hate to say it, but you reach a certain point and you do want to get paid for your writing. As much as I could love to do it, I'd love to be writing constantly, podcasting constantly. When you got the wife, you got the kid, you got the responsibilities of the job, you have all of that. It's very hard to do. It's hard to actually muster up the enthusiasm to do it because you know your window is going to be so small. And sometimes to write great things, to create great things, you really need time to just sit and contemplate. And you almost sometimes need something to not happen for an hour, to be hitting your head against a wall, and then ultimately for the little epiphany to hit you and then to go forward. But you need space in your mind to create a lot of times. To create something good, you need all the nodes of the things you understand and know to connect together in some magic alchemy. And that's hard to do. But when I'm on the hook for writing articles, when I have a deadline, when I'm going to be paid for it, and actually in the current magazine atmosphere, you're paid pretty handsomely for this. I won't say what it is, but it's enough where you really feel the level of professional responsibility to get it done. So I'll often have a month and a half to put it together. Over a couple of weekends, I'll do my research, and I love the research. It's just so fun to be back in this game, to do all your research, to kind of be in the shower sometimes, and the angle hits you of how you're going to do it. Like the big one with that Shakur Stevenson was the Malcolm Gladwell insight, where I was going to tie it together with Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. And I was going to say Shakur Stevenson was basically an outlier and how he fit that model. And sometimes you need to cogitate on things. You need them to cook in your mind over time to figure what your insight is. But it's fun to be thinking on something for a while, to be researching on it, to find little tidbits that you can assimilate into your story. And 750 words is both a lot and not a lot. When it's a blank canvas, it's a lot of words. When you start getting all the different things, all the research you've had, all of your story angles together, it ultimately fills up pretty quickly. But it's fun. It's fun to go from the blank canvas to the full draft, and then to have editors. And the people on this magazine are former editors at real newspapers, like typically the Star Ledger. Star Ledger was based in Newark. It's a New Jersey paper. Newark is kind of the capital in many ways of a lot of the scene. I mean, Trenton's our real capital, but a lot's going on in Newark that has to do with that paper. And so it's been fun. You feed that into the beast, and then your edits come back, and then you got to trim things out, add things here, do this piece. And it's it does get a little bit frustrating sometimes going back and forth 2 and 3 times because you feel like you're done, and then all of a sudden you're not. But it's really cool to be back within that machine again, creating, drafting, collaborating, coming back. And then at the end of the day, when it hits that magazine, that beautiful glossy magazine, something you've written is in something real. Now, it's great to be on the internet. The internet gives us all the ability to be the media. It gives us all the ability to write as much as we want, and to produce things and to make them look good. But almost because of how many people can write on the internet and how open it is to all, which is a great thing. But because of that, it almost makes the scarcity of a magazine, of actually having to fit 750 words into something with the cool headlines, with the cool pictures, with your byline. It almost creates like a premium aspect to it that makes you feel special when you think about where it started, when you think about that empty Word document that you start with, when you have nothing going, and then you start to research and all this, and you almost see the final product, and it takes you back to that process. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's been a great little renaissance for me, writing again, and I'm writing at levels that I never even had to before. When I was writing for my blog, I didn't really have editors. I mean, they'd check in, but I didn't have to submit something and then have the potential where it comes back. It was sort of me in my own silo writing, and then a lot of times, like 2 days later, I'd go back and read something I wrote or blogged and published, and it would be like, oh my God, that error was there, or you used that word 3 times in a row or something like that, and you'd then go back and then edit it out and fix it at that point, but you're like, oh, I can't believe that got out there. And to some degree, that happened at the Nets as well, because when I was working for the Nets, it was like a traditional corporate job during the day. And I worked in the marketing department. So it's not like I had an editor. I was kind of the end publisher and editor and writer. So often I'd be at that arena till 12:30, 1:30 in the morning, writing, putting together picture slideshows, headlines, putting my story together. And I would just go live with it and post it on the NBA website for the New Jersey Nets. And there wasn't even anybody up to review it. And it sort of wasn't within their purview to be reviewing everything you do. Sometimes they would look at something during the day if there were practice notes or anything like that. But I was pretty much just posting, sending it out to the world. And it was a big audience, because sometimes then the NBA itself would link to that article, NBA.com. And when you came in the next day and you saw an error then, and an error was very possible because, again, you were up the whole day. You're publishing something at 1 a.m. A part of you wants to get out. A part of you is kind of like, I got to finish this. I have this story basically done. And the way the human brain works is you think it's done, and maybe you forgot that there was something you needed to finish, in the second paragraph, or you didn't quite. It's hard to edit yourself because you don't look at it the same way as outside eyes do. It's in anything, right? You should always have someone else look at your stuff. But again, I didn't have that in this job. It was more just an open season. It was sort of like I was just blogging, but it was for the New Jersey Nets. It was for their NBA website. I mean, it was, at the end of the day, when you get to that site, it was nba.com/njnets or /nets. So it was an NBA site. And so you'd post it and then you'd look, and sometimes that would reach like 10,000 people, 8,000 people. And I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I was 25. I'll keep saying at the end of the day, I was 25 years old. I had just been blogging. So the audience was who the audience was. They weren't, Woodward and Bernstein. They're not looking over the stuff thinking, oh my God, look at these errors. If I was just writing for the NJ.com blog, I guess everyone trusts I got right for this. But that said, I got to this point in life now where, I'm in my early 30s, mid 30s, and I finally have real editors. And so it's a weird thing because you kind of run through this weird gauntlet where you felt like you knew everything, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I was writing on NBA sites and I was writing on NJ.com. And then now someone's saying, oh, you might want to edit this down, do this. It's a good little reckoning. It's a good comeuppance a little bit, and not in a bad way. I mean, again, you're getting paid, you're writing about cool things, and you're being edited and you're collaborating, and you're ended up in a magazine. It's great. But it all kind of winds back around to this Newark Bound magazine has a partnership with Newark Happenings, which is the Newark, they have a big acronym, the Greater Newark Convention and Visitor Bureau. So it's sort of the tourism and conventions and, commerce outfit of Newark. And so there's a partnership between Newark Bound and Newark, this GNCVB, but their website is Newark Happening. And I guess as part of the partnership, Newark Bound has to create an original and craft an original article that will appear on Newark Happening. Nice little idea, actually, if you think about it. And so with St. Patrick's Day coming, maybe because I have an Irish name, McQueenie, the Newark Bound editor said, hey, would you be willing to write this 700-word article on all the cool places in Newark where you can get good Irish food? And I thought, hey, why not? I pretty much say everything. I say yes to everything right now. It's just writing. It's just creating. Someone's going to edit it at the end of the day. So whatever. It's out of sports, but hey, what are we talking? I can do tech. I can do business. I can do this. And I knew a fair amount of the Irish places in Newark as it is. But it was fun because you get this assignment. And of course I procrastinated until I had pretty much 2 weekends left to be able to do it. And I mostly did it within one day, within one afternoon when my son Liam was sleeping, and I wrote about the different places in Newark. There's not too many, actually, because the Irish came to Newark as they came to many similar cities in the late 1800s during the potato famine, and when they were looking for new opportunity in America, they came to places like Newark because of the jobs available, because of the familial connections who came before them. But so at this point, there's not a lot of places left. There's a couple of major places. One is called McGovern's, which is right across from Rutgers, Newark. And it's been there since, the 1800s, I believe, early 1900s. And it was sort of a pipeline where you would end up when you came from Newark to get your first beer. And then a lot of times this McGovern guy would get people jobs from there. There's a place right around the office, right around the corner from my office called Kilkenny's, which is great. And so I'm trying to go through all these different places. And you almost become a restaurant reviewer. You become someone who's parsing the different aspects of the menu to find the cool little nuggets that you can tell people. And then I came across this really great diner, which anybody who's from the Newark area knows this diner, Top's Diner. It's one of the best in the state. And I was looking through their menu and I was like, oh, they got a couple Irish things. And I was like, oh, you can totally get the best Irish coffee there, because what diner doesn't have great coffee? And this place has a liquor license. So it all worked out. I posted, and that's how I ended up with my St. Patrick's Day angle. I wrote about St. Patrick's Day. Newark has a great parade, as do many cities of its ilk. And I got this story out there that appeared in the Newark Happening website. So it's not a magazine, but it is a website. I just got back from Atlantic City. I had talked about going to Washington, D.C. for a business trip, and how that was a once in a blue moon kind of activity where I got out of my home zone and ended up going out on business. Well, a week later, I went to Atlantic City for a conference for someone I will not name, but it was a conference for kind of a client we service, and we set up a table and gave away some stuff and different things like that. But it was fun. I go on this basically every 2 years, and we stayed at the Tropicana. Atlantic City's getting a little funky again. First of all, there was a lot of smoke in the casino. I don't remember this being the case, and I wonder if it's a way to get a lot of people back into the casino. Maybe you're going to a different kind of clientele, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to fill up the coffers and get people back in there. But it was very smoky, like more so than I ever remember. And I thought they reached a point where a lot of these casinos were cleaned up, or they had air filters, or smoking was really frowned upon, and there were like little sections where people had to go to do it, and it was really blocked off. Well, that was not the case. It was really, really smoky, and that was a little strange. And the part you never really think about when you go to a place like Atlantic City, where everything is within that one casino, and it's like miles walking in this one casino to get from place to place, you don't go outside. Now, I know when they have the little pavilion, especially in the Tropicana, where it has all the restaurants and little shops, and it looks like this little French pavilion or something, and it has the fake sky, you believe that you're outside, and you're not. So you could go 3 days, as I did, as me and my business partners did. You can go 3 days without seeing real light. You see it outside your hotel, obviously, but actually being out in it. And so that made kind of the smoke a lot worse. But it was a lot of fun. The first night we went to Cuba Libre, which is kind of a Cuban restaurant right down there in the main area. I had 3 mojitos. I don't have mojitos much. I don't have a lot of hard alcohol drinks, but I was feeling the mojitos, and they taste good. Nice little lemonade-ish feel. Strange thing was, I don't know if it's because they were pouring light or whatever. I had 3 and I didn't really feel it. Now, I didn't eat a lot that day, and I had a lot of caffeine, and they say caffeine masks alcohol a lot. Now, I didn't have to get in a car. Obviously, I was going upstairs, but yeah, that was strange. We had a lot of nice appetizers, as you do there, kind of tapas feel, empanadas, all that. It was really good. Next day, we went to P.F. Chang's. Always loved my P.F. Chang's. I've been going there since like 2004, when I moved out to Phoenix to live with my cousin and his roommate. We got a house right out of when I graduated college. Went out to Phoenix, and I lived there for like 3 or 4 months. That was around the time I got that NJ.com job. One of the reasons I actually came back home was having that and wanted to be back on the time zone for my nets. But my cousin was a master server or training server, the highest level server at P.F. Chang's. And P.F. Chang's came from the Phoenix area, Scottsdale area. And so he was at one of the original P.F. Chang's, which came out with the new stuff ahead of everyone else. And I grew to love the place at that point. I worked at a Mexican restaurant when I was out in Phoenix. I wasn't a waiter. I was really behind a cash register. It did have a bar, but people would come up and get their burritos, all that, and you'd just give it to them there. No servers or anything like that. But often I worked there, and I always say I was able to work 3 or 4 nights a week, 4 hours at a clip, and I was able to more than pay my rent, pay my share at this place. I always say it was like a reverse retirement. I was living in Phoenix at 21 years old, and I would work like 16 hours a week from 5 to 9 at night. Sometimes I'd work on a Saturday or Sunday, I believe, during the day. And then we'd go to the gym, we'd work out, we'd eat like nice breakfasts, we'd go play golf. It was awesome. It was fantastic. But my food was also covered for dinner. So I would eat these burritos, these massive burritos each night. And then on the other nights, my cousin would come home with P.F. Chang's. So I was eating this really good burritos and P.F. Chang's, going back and forth, rotating each night. It was awesome. I loved P.F. Chang's. I completely loved it. And I was there at the time when it was really taking off. And then it was starting to come into new places in the East Coast. And it was awesome. Every time one would come in, we'd almost make a pilgrimage, whoever it was, me, my brother, different friends who loved it. And it was a point where I was like counting all the ones I'd been to. And I think it was 16 or 18 or 20. I mean, it was a bit of an obsession. It was great though. The experience is awesome. You love the light. You love the atmosphere. Just a great place. The food is fantastic. I knew all the secrets about how you can get the food in the healthiest way. I remember when I was traveling with the Nets, the one season I traveled with them, we ended up in Salt Lake City. That was the first city I believe I traveled to with the team. It was at the front of a long road trip around Thanksgiving. And we landed in Salt Lake. And then the next day we were going to lunch. And I went with the announcers, the aforementioned Tim Capstraw, Chris Carino, and then Iron Eagle, the famous Iron Eagle, was there. And I remember going to a P.F. Chang's during lunch and explaining to him all these little tricks of the trade with P.F. Chang's. And he actually picked up his phone, called his wife, and said, "You're not going to believe this guy." It was almost like that scene in Back to the Future when it's like, "Hey, Marvin," or Chuck, "Hey, it's your cousin Marvin. You're not going to believe this sound." And it was like Marty McFly playing like Chuck Berry and Marvin telling his cousin Chuck Berry about it, that silly thing. But Iron Eagle calls his wife and he goes, "You got to get on with this guy. He's going to tell you about it." And so he gives the phone to me and I'm telling his wife about stock velveting and P.F. Chang's and how you make it healthy and not as fried. It's kind of funny, but I loved it. Completely loved it. And like anything, it's sad when chains either get bought, private equity, whatever the case is. I think P.F. Chang's went in that direction, but they build up with their service. They give the highest level of service and the highest level of food and cooking and all that. And then to get to a point where they get bought, and then they're bought and the soul is sucked out of it. And in some ways, the soul has been sucked out of P.F. Chang's. I mean, we ate it in Atlantic City, and it was good. But when we, weeks ago, we went there before my mom was sworn in as a Bergen County freeholder. We went to one in Hackensack, and it wasn't as good. It was a little sketchy. It's not the same servers. It's not the same aiming for perfection. It left a lot to be desired, and that can happen with things. I mean, we're seeing it happen with Macaroni Grill, which when I was growing up was the new kid on the block, the amazing Italian experience with the bread and the great grilled chicken and the make your own pastas and all this, and it's fallen off. One by where I grew up closed down. I remember going there we go there like every weekend 20 years ago. Time moves by, it happens, but it's sad. We later that day we went to Carmine's, which is always fun. The family style Italian, and everything's family style. The bottle of wine they came out with was family style, and me and my coworker kind of polished off what was the one bottle, which is the size of 2 pretty much. It was intense. We also made the mistake of getting the filet and chicken parm. Bizarre mix. I mean, they both tasted great, but it was a totally bizarre mix. It's funny though, being at these conventions, being on these vendor rows, where you're vendors and other people are vendors, and we get to know the different vendors over the years because they're all the same ones. And there's one guy, he's with, I think, an insurance company. I think he owns it, family-run concern, and he's a crazy guy. He will he just has that look in his eye where he's like, "I don't respect you, but I'm going to walk up in your area." And so, I mean, this goes back years. This is our 3rd time being around this one. And this guy walks up. He just kind of meanders over. He's got a big Dilbertish body. He meanders over to other tables, and he's looking over the tables. He's looking at the swag you're giving away. He's sort of inquiring about whether he's going to take one. It's like an old Western city on these vendor rows. It's like he's going to pull his gun and answer you to a duel if you don't let him take your little power bank charger, these $5 power bank chargers you give away with your company's logo on it. And he's he's always a little sketchy. He's always a little shady. It's always something weird about him. He doesn't really hear what you're saying to him, but he's going to say to you what he wants to, and he expects you to hear it. There was a vendor next to us, and I'll get to him, where he said this guy walked over. This was at a point when maybe me and my coworkers were at lunch, and he said he walked over, and this vendor next to us didn't know this guy at all, really. And this guy just walks over. He bends over the table under a light that happened to be placed about halfway in this guy's table, bends over, puts his watch out to get the time, and he's like head to head with the guy. I mean, it's just bizarre things. It's like pissing contests. It's like, I'm gonna pee on your fire hydrant and you're gonna pee on mine, and the guy's like, no, I don't want to get into that. I mean, he didn't say that, but you know what I mean? It's a little weird. But when we were at Carmine's the one night, the guy he comes over. First of all, he goes, how's the bottle of wine? Because we got the house wine, the Carmine's house wine in the bottle. And we're like, it's all right. You want to taste? And he's like, no, I don't drink. And we're like, I don't. Well, then why do you care about the wine? That's weird. And then the next day he came over to us and he's like, I can't believe you guys polished off that bottle of wine. It's like, you're way too focused on this wine right now, man. You got to calm the hell down. You got to just, what is your hang up? What is going on? But at the end of our dinner, he comes over and he pretty much asks how the dinner was and all this. And that he's been working his butt off this whole time, and he's been doing client requests and all this. And he reaches a point where he's asking us about everything and all that. And then he's like, I'm even getting clients up in the room and all this. And I was just trying to make a stupid joke. So I'm like, oh, you got to be careful about that. You know, almost like, I don't know what I was getting at. I had a lot of wine, so maybe I was making some weird like third level abstract sexual joke or something. And he then goes into this whole thing about, no, I don't get into that. And he gets into the whole thing about how his wife has pancreatic cancer and he thought he was going to lose her. And he goes to the best doctor. And I just got word that my uncle actually has pancreatic cancer. And he goes, oh, where? And I told him in this situation about this. And he's like, oh, where does he go? And I said, I think he was going to New York. And he goes, well, they're second best. They're good. They're second best. And then he, of course, says how the one he goes to in Philadelphia was first best. And it was just this weird situation where he's just doubling down on this story, going deep, talking about his grandkids, all this. And there was a point where some of us were like, we might want to independently verify this, not to sound terrible, but there was so much shadiness about what he's got going on and what he's working and doing all this that you sometimes don't know if he's always selling and is he kind of, I don't want to say making up a story. I'm sure it's true, but he leaves a lot to be desired when in your regular dealings with him, that when he tells something like that. And why is he giving this much information? Why is he going to these levels? Again, we're not saying it's not real, but you're sitting there going, what the heck just happened here? And we're all sitting there like sobered up from our wine where we had it all. And he leaves us in this wake of like, oh dear God, what the hell happened? Weird stuff though. That night though, we were shot. And one coworker went back to the room, and then I was going to go back, but my boss was like, here's 40, just throw it in the slot machine. I love slot machines. I'll tell you that much. I mean, I know that they're totally black boxes where they are set up to make you fail, but you still think you have a shot. And it's also better than being around other humans, trying to play blackjack or poker. I always feel inferior in these situations and that I'm always doing something wrong. It's not a good situation. I don't love it, but I throw it in the machine, and I was up to 120 actually off of my 40. I love Wheel of Fortune. I die for that Wheel of Fortune noise to catch and then to be on the big one on top. And so we're doing it, we're playing it, and I ended up at about 80. So I went up to 120, ended 80, called it. So I doubled the money, and it wasn't even my money. So I walked out with $80 I didn't even have, went up to the room, down to sleep. The really funny thing was, so the next day we're talking to the guy next to us, the one of the aforementioned story with the insurance guy bending over his table. And he's from like somewhere in the Midwest. And so I don't even think he understood what Atlantic City was, and that it's not the most safe place in the country. I think some people think it's Vegas, and there are some safety mechanisms to Vegas. It's a little wholesome. But this guy was, I don't know what he was rolling with, but he went to something like an Econo Lodge, and he got it on Expedia. So the whole thing's booked, at the front. And he was telling us this whole story about how he went to the Econo Lodge, and it's open. It's sort of a motel feel. I think it was an Econo Lodge. But then he went to another bar at another hotel. I believe it was called the Chelsea, where I actually had my bachelor party. And he's sitting in the bar talking to the bartender. And a part of me is like, how did he know to go to the Chelsea? Why did he go to the Chelsea? Like, the Tropicana has a million places in it. And he was telling us this whole thing about how he has anxiety being around people he might work with, and he doesn't want to talk. And it's like, okay, you got it. So I guess he goes to the Chelsea. And the person at the Chelsea proceeded to tell him that the Econo Lodge, or the motel he was staying at, is frequently solicited door to door by drugs, prostitutes, all this. I'm like, what? They're just knocking on doors soliciting. This is how far the law has fallen in a place like Atlantic City, that not only can you get away with these things, these vice-like things, which I'm not speaking down upon, I'm just saying honestly what's going on, but you can actually go door to door as if you're selling Bibles and the law is not going to touch you. And so he got into this whole conversation with the bartender and back and forth, and ultimately ended up getting a place in the Chelsea. So he had 2 hotel rooms, one in the Econo Lodge because it was pre-booked. You can't get out of that because it's, through Expedia. So the money's locked. And then, and he's staying at the Chelsea. And then he tells us that he was going to end up, this was a Wednesday to Friday, he was going to stay right in until Monday. And we're like, what? What's this guy doing? It's funny how he went, how he's got 2 hotel rooms and he's going to stay past the time. Like, people don't know what Atlantic City is, I guess. I'm not saying it's bad. You just got to keep your ears up. You got to stay vigilant to what's going on. And that's actually a good aspect of being in something like the Tropicana, is that you're locked in place. You're pretty safe there. Although it was funny, there were people panhandling, walking through the fake little cobblestone village in the Tropicana, which is a strange thing. You're locked in a place that's supposed to make you feel like you're in a real village. But you're safe to it. And then there's people asking for money. You're like, wait, who's who? Who's actually in the casino? Who's here? I mean, there is a lot of breakdown of order in Atlantic City right now. I mean, the whole place is kind of bankrupt. It's really being held up by, I don't know, by spit and duct tape or something. I mean, it's crazy, but it was fun. Beautiful hotel rooms there. The weird thing is we're 60 floors up in this hotel. And I'm often like, man, do I trust how these places are built, how quickly they were built, how much sprawl there is to them? And you feel the wind coming at you and you're like, yeah, we just take for granted we're safe. And you guess you are, why not? I mean, they must be built to some specification that's safe, but the wind's whipping around and you're just like, oh my God. The other thing I'm thinking of, does your body sense when it goes to sleep that you're 60 floors up, your proprioception, I think it's called, which is your sense of everything around you. Does it even know that you're that high up? Like when you're comfortably asleep or are the blinds closed and it just doesn't even know what's going on out there. Because when you then go and look, you're like, oh my God, I am so far up. And I have to wonder, like, does the body sense that? Do you get a different sleeping experience because the body is vigilant to the fact that you are so high up? Or do you just give it up? I don't know. But it's funny, when I go on these vacations, I talked about it, the Washington, D.C. one, I bring everything. I bring enough stuff to tide me over for 2 weeks, even though I'm going to be there for 2 nights. And I get mad that I don't get through any of it. I get through like one 1/100th of the things I brought. But I did bring my Amazon Echo Tap this time. So the Echo Tap is the portable Amazon Alexa enabled speaker. It plugs in, but it can also be taken off the port, and it goes on about 9 to 10 hour charge on its own. Big thing with the Echo Tap that makes it almost something you should buy potentially ahead of the other Echoes. It's cheaper, but it's now Alexa enabled. You can now speak to it. Before you had to press a button and then it would come on and you could speak to it. Now you can just speak to it. So of course I bring it on the vacation, and at the end of the day, or not the vacation, the work trip. At the end of the day, as a Bluetooth speaker, it's amazing. So just telling your phone to hook to it and play whatever's on your phone, it's totally worth it. But you need a Wi-Fi connection for it to be Alexa enabled. I thought, hey, I'll hook it to the hotel Wi-Fi and it'll be in business. I did that, and it was like, it wouldn't like elicit when you talk to it. It would, although it would solicit at the Econo Lodge. Just kidding. So you would talk to it and it would, like, the sound would go off that it heard you, but it was like fighting the Wi-Fi against all the other people who were in the hotel, and it just wouldn't work the right way. So it wasn't the end of the world, but it was, it was a funny, funky situation where you're talking to it and it wouldn't get back to you. Sometimes like 10 seconds later, it would start talking in a broken up way, trying to tell you the weather. It was weird, but it made me think. This Amazon Echo, the Echo Tap, Amazon Music, which is their version of Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play All Access. It's this $10 a month streaming all-you-can-eat music service. It's out there, It's like these other ones. But Amazon has this thing where if you hook it to one Amazon Echo speaker, it's $4 a month. And I thought, boy, if you're going to get that, it might make sense for that Amazon Echo Tap because it's so portable. You could take it wherever you want to go, and it can be ported. And then you get that $4 a month for the all-you-can-eat music. It might make sense to get on the Echo Tap. I don't need this because I have Google All Access Music plan, so I'm fine with that. I'll actually Bluetooth from that to the Amazon Echo for a lot of my music. But there's a lot of music you get automatically as an Amazon Prime member. These Echoes are great for Prime members. I actually heard some cool things that are coming on with the Echo potentially, where it can maybe accept calls, and maybe calls Echo to Echo. So you could say to the Echo in your living room, call my brother Mike, and it'll know that, whether through contacts or whatever, it'll know that he has an Echo, and it'll call his Echo through Wi-Fi. And then you could be talking to them through these high definition speakers, almost like a house to house intercom. The other thing is, if you have a bunch of Echoes in your house, they're saying that maybe it could be an intercom system itself, where if my wife's in the bedroom, I'm in the living room, she could say, call living room, and it'll ring, and you'll just say, I guess you tell it to pick up, and then you could talk to her. Or it would even make more sense if she's in the bedroom and I'm in the gym, because it's like in the basement, it's like 2 floors, and you could be talking to each other through that. Kind of has an iMessage, FaceTime-ish feel, FaceTime audio, because it would only be audio, but that could be kind of cool, because I'm almost wondering where the utility is in having a lot of them. I love having a lot of them just as purpose devices in the different rooms, but the way that they can play with each other, when that gets figured out, that's going to be cool, because a lot of people have these all throughout their house, and a lot of family members have them. So it would be really, really cool, I think, to do that. The last point I want to make is I talked about downloading all these shows, magazines, books, all this for my trips. Didn't get through any of them. One thing my wife and I have gotten through, the show Billions. We are absolutely loving it. At least I am. I think she's liking it. But this was on the heels for me of reading this great New Yorker feature on Bill Ackman, who's a hedge fund activist investor. And so I'm like locked in on this whole world. And Billions is about a hedge fund investor, sort of a king of industry, a titan of industry, in New York, and the district attorney in New York, the Southern District, which is the famous district attorney that kind of we all know because he's taking on such a large part of the economy in Wall Street. He is going after the sins and the improprieties of all the things that happen on Wall Street. He's sort of the sheriff, the bad guy, police. Well, he's not bad. He's the sheriff of Wall Street in many ways. In fact, we just saw Preet Bharara get asked to leave and then resign and say he was fired by Donald Trump. He's the Southern District attorney in New York. And Paul Giamatti plays that character. So it's this hedge fund king of industry against the district attorney. It has like a Marvel superhero feel without the outfits, right? It's Damian Lewis playing the Axelrod is his name, Bobby Axelrod, and then Paul Giamatti plays the district attorney. As I said, can't think of his name. But it's cool. It's like the back and forth of the whole world. It's fast moving. The story goes quick. It ties in a lot of real world hedge fund stuff, which is fun. I'm into that stuff. The whole too big to fail, these kind of Bill Ackman profiles I'm talking about. I love the innards of finance in the stories of the people, right? Like I don't like knowing like collateralized debt obligations or things like that. I like the people trying to make money and maybe go right up to the line, right up to that line where the law ends and going against the law stops. I love it. And then the people tasked with, like this Paul Giamatti character, tasked with policing that. I mean, it's fun. Maggie Siff plays Paul Giamatti's wife. She also works for the firm that the Damian Lewis character is the head of, that hedge fund. So that's kind of cool. Paul Giamatti's father in the show is like this old school money guy who's very tied in with this whole thing. It's an awesome show to watch so far. It's in its second season. We only just started watching it. I had a weird feeling about starting it. I don't know why. Maggie Siff, by the way, was really good in Sons of Anarchy. She was also in Mad Men. But it's really fun to watch. It's like I said, it's almost like the fifth Marvel show on Netflix, but it's about and a lot of the same people who are in those Marvel shows are actually in this show. The consigliere or second in command deputy to Paul Giamatti in Billions is the same actor who plays the second in command to Wilson Fisk in Daredevil. So he's the bad guy there, but it's like a lot of the same feel. I don't know what it is, but it's Marvel. It's like Marvel hedge fund or something. And then the guy just doesn't turn into some superhero. But yeah, very good. I would totally highly recommend it. All right. Well, I think that was a hodgepodge of stuff. It was good. So everybody enjoy the rest of their March, whatever your weather patterns are, wherever you live. And little St. Patty's Day. Have a Guinness, a Bailey's, some shepherd's pie, some corned beef, whatever it is. It's always corned beef and everything, and all of a sudden it's Irish. But shepherd's pie is fun too. And I actually stole one of my mother-in-law's scones, which is a dessert. I needed something to tide me over from breakfast until this dinner, so I had that decaf latte, so I could hold it together here. But I appreciate you listening, my friends, and I hope your week goes well. I love you all. Bye-bye.